it mixed all the things.
I love it.
Sports, business strategy, content creation. And that's why I think social is so great, is like you get to sit in the meetings with, high level people about high level things. And then you get to take your phone out and like film a selfie video with, Gronk in the locker room about X, Y, or Z, post it on social and see a bunch of fans like comment and like it.
Hey everybody, welcome back again for another episode of Radical Content. Today we got an awesome episode, and not just because it's two Erics, but I'm excited to have Eric Stark on Radical Content today. He is the co-founder of Slate, which I know we'll talk a lot about, but he spent a ton of time in sports marketing and sports social. And so, we were talking off air, Eric, before we kind of got into this, that Radical Content is really here to help brands kind of break through, tell stories in new and different ways, and kind of lean into engagement rather than interruption. And so I love talking to people in sports because they've got such a, they've had to wear a lot of hats. Sometimes it burns them out, right? Like there's a lot of that narrative going on in sports, but they've had to wear a lot of hats. They've had to create a lot of things. And I just think they're forced to always be on the competitive side of what does it mean to create, and how do you publish better, and how does the Niners do better than the Cowboys, even in the marketing team? So excited to dive into it all, but I'm pumped to have you on the show. So thanks for joining Radical Content.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Yeah. Sports, social, and sports marketing is kind of social media ramped up to a 10 because
it really
the amount
is.
of content is insane, and the competitiveness between the teams, even though they're not necessarily competing for market share, they are competing for who's getting the most engagement, who's getting the most followers, and it really like elevates everyone really quickly. And there's a lot to be done and said about sports content and sports social media. And it's always a fascinating space for me.
Yeah. And I just got another one of those PDFs that some agency created. Actually, I think it was my buddy David out at STN Digital. I don't know if you know David. But they were talking about all the who's winning and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, you guys are going to stress these teams out. But it's real. And the cool thing about it though, is there is something. Look, I've worked in sports radio many years ago, and then I worked at EA Sports, but I've never worked at the franchise level, like an individual team, or at the league level. And so I don't know what that looks like and feels like. I know they churn through people. They burn through them pretty quick because there's so much, but they fall in love with it. And the cool thing for people like me that's worked in travel and gaming and entertainment is I look at sports as like, how in the world are they organizing their teams? What tools are they using? Which I know we're going to talk some tools today with Slate to be able to create so iteratively because it's such a unique advantage. And we'll get into all that. But I wanted to quickly ask you a question that it's not kind of a full career question, but it is a little bit of this question where, where did you first kind of catch that desire to be in the content and social space? And I know you've gone beyond that, and definitely now you're getting kind of a technology software platform. But your whole career was built off of that. And even the tools that you're building now is to support those people. So how did you kind of first jump into this desire to help brands, in this essence, franchises like the Niners and the NFL and the Kansas City Chiefs to want to tell stories and to want to connect with fans?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I always wanted to be a content creator in some form. And I think that started in college with higher aspirations to be like a film director, and like creating movies. And then I think I realized pretty quickly, I probably wasn't like best suited to be that type of person, and actually chase like a creative career in like film. So then I wanted to get into like film marketing and get into the marketing world. But I always had an interest in sports and just like deep passion for sports, growing up. And it was a huge part of my life. And then I realized, I could make a career out of sports through the connection I had that worked at the NFL. One of my best friend's sisters was actually at the NFL, and I would constantly pick her brain about what it's like to work there. And
it's always a best friend's sister that gets our career started.
That's, I got to shout out Alyssa Lippman. She's still NFL. She's a badass. And without her, I probably wouldn't be here today, because she set the ball rolling on what ended up being my career in sports, which has transitioned to this. And basically, I got into the league through an internship, and that internship was through the digital media team that oversaw like all 32 NFL team websites from a platform perspective. Mm-hmm. So we would be the team that oversees the content management system that all the teams were on, but we would also make recommendations to the teams about what sort of content performs well on digital at that point. And then as social started to become more and more important, this was in 2012, that became a part of our purview. And I realized pretty quickly from the league side, I was recommending content to create. On the team side, I actually could be the one creating content. So when I started doing that, I started to realize I actually could really get creative and fulfill that outlet of like having a creative idea, filming it, putting a piece together, posting it on social and seeing the results. And I was like, this is actually a way for me to be in business and be strategic, but still be like a content creator, and get to feel like, you know, I was able to actually make things that a lot of people saw and liked. So then I realized, oh, like this is the type of content I was kind of meant to be creating. And that's kind of where, you know, it mixed all the things.
I love it.
Sports, business strategy, content creation. And that's why I think social is so great, is like you get to sit in the meetings with, you know, high level people about high level things. And then you get to take your phone out and like film a selfie video with, you know, Gronk in the locker room about X, Y, or Z, post it on social and see a bunch of fans like comment and like it. So it really is a cool mix of creativity and strategy.
I think there's going to be some people in college or people earlier in their career that are going to be listening to this that are sports fans that are so envious of what you're describing as a day in the life of working for the NFL. And look, I totally agree with you. I remember when I came from sports radio and then I went to EA Sports and we were figuring out this thing called social media in 2006 and 2007. And I kind of had this light bulb moment for me, which was like, man, if brands can be compelling, interesting, and entertaining, they can connect with audiences without advertising, just like we did back in the radio days. And so that was just a kind of a moment for me that I think, similar to you, it combined my interests of sports and media and technology and creativity kind of all in one. And it definitely kind of ignited my career. So I think we share some similarities in a lot of ways there. You know, as you think about the NFL, and I have some friends that have worked there and have shared some things with me over the years, but how does the NFL or even broadly, I know you work with a lot of other leagues like Major League Baseball and probably a little bit of the NBA and other groups. You know, how do they think about consumer engagement when it comes to building audiences and fans? I've always kind of said that, look, fandom is core to their business model, so they have to. And most brands, fandom is not core to their business model. Fandom is almost like a optional, like, oh, it's nice to have, but it's not the primary. The primary is awareness and conversion. But in sports, fandom and loyalty is core to the business model. So how do you take things from sports and that idea of fan engagement being so important and apply it to brands that, whether they realize it or not, and I think we're seeing it with a lot of B2C brands, a lot of technology brands, the fandom is wildly important. It's just hard to get to. And sports has kind of this head start. So long way of saying, what can you take from these sports franchises where fandom is important and kind of apply that strategy, that philosophy, and that thinking to other brands?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, you know, at the NFL, we often talk about like fan development, and that's really what like the marketing function does in a lot of different areas. And I think in sports, the teams and leagues are, there's obviously always like the bottom line, like they're trying to sell merch and tickets, but they're also more comfortable with realizing that, you know, a fan is success as well. And that will convert into other ways, like deeper down the line. Right. Mm-hmm. So they do like fan engagement studies to try to see like what percentage of people in, you know, international countries are NFL fans or claim that they're NFL fans, and try to increase that, you know, and that's different than just saying we're trying to increase, you know, the sales of jerseys in Germany. It's like, we're trying to increase just people that say they're interested in the NFL. Right. And obviously the business model is a little different because that translates to hopefully people watching on TV, which translates to like bigger rights deals. So it all kind of obviously like funnels down to the bottom line. But, you know, I think I think the best brands consider themselves like a cult that, has a
Yeah.
lot of following. And a sports team is obviously like the biggest sort of cults that we have in our popular culture right
Yeah.
now. I think the best brands really try to replicate that and make it like it's not just a product that you like, it's you're kind of marking yourself as part of
Yeah.
this community when you're engaging with that brand, showing off that brand's logo and all those things.
Yeah. So then what can these legacy brands, they're not all legacy, but some of them are legacy brands that struggle with engagement, entertainment, struggle with investing in social teams, struggle with, investing in content and YouTube, these things that we know we're seeing brands be built. Creators are literally building multi-million-dollar businesses on these platforms.
Yep.
While many brands are sitting idly by, putting more money into display ads and television, and CRM, which, part of the mix, also important.
Yeah.
But what can we take from the NFL and maybe Major League Baseball and these others and apply to some of these legacy brands to say, you got to start doing these and these things to get that momentum going?
I think the biggest thing, and it's very, very hard for brands to do, is to like let go of strict like attribution in terms of your investment, right? Because if you really invested in building a YouTube presence and building a great social presence and a cult following, it's going to be hard to track one-to-one when those dollars start flowing into the business and where those are coming from and why. But like the best brands who are seeing results from it have like faith that the content is going to result in deeper brand affinity, which is going to result in the bottom line. But it's really hard to track like from point A to point B, right? You could pay a ton of money and launch a Super Bowl commercial and then see the next day like how many sales you're getting. A social strategy is like built over time, and we know the best brands who are doing it on social, and we know that that is affecting their business, right? The Duolingos of the world. But like, they're not going to have a chart internally that shows like this exact post led to this exact level of business, right? There is a level of just like faith, but also like belief that, building this content will result in like net positive down the line. And the ones who don't invest in it, it's kind of exponentially good for the ones who do and exponentially bad for the ones who we've seen care more about, hey, well, I could, do a display ad and track exactly what that does for me. And it's like, cool, you're seeing the numbers better, but your numbers aren't going to be as big because of that. And it's really hard for like marketers and people, especially not in marketing, to understand that and to be willing to commit to something that is hard to measure.
Yeah. I think there's a handful of things I'd point out and I'm in complete mad agreement with you. There's a lot of pressure on marketing teams. Marketing teams can also be considered more of a cost center. There's a lot of questions about the data and is that real? And are those points that you're getting on TV real? Are those PR impressions real? And so there's just a lot of skepticism that can come with marketing and performance marketing. The ability to showcase more one-to-one data through things like, digital and CRM and Google ads and Facebook has helped marketing a lot, but it's also created like this decision with, if it doesn't give us the perfect data, then we're not going to do it because this over here is, and it's given us this desire, I think, for many brands to just go more into performance marketing rather than brand building. And then the last thing I'd just say that I just kind of add into what you're saying and kind of get your thoughts on is it's a little bit of a bet and a belief, like you said, like we need modern marketers that are connected to social, to YouTube, that aren't saying things like, well, I'll ask my granddaughter what's popular on TikTok, right? Like those are the things that CMOs are having conversations with. Instead, how do we have conversations where CMOs and VPs of marketing are inherently understanding those platforms and the benefit? Because where you see those brands that exist, I had Josh Rangel on, and he was talking about some of his clients, big clients that he's worked with, like McDonald's and Pepsi and things like that. There's a ton of brands that this is at the center of the table for the business. And there's a ton of brands that it's just not, right? And the main difference a lot of times is the awareness and the education of senior leaders of the importance of some of these tools over time. Do you agree with some of that, or is there something in there you would add to?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. No, I think that's right. And I think the thing that like maybe some of those folks don't realize is it's not just like post great content and then see the results down the line. If you actually committed to content and brand as your core strategy, it will uplift everything else that you're doing. So if you want your programmatic ads to perform well or your paid social to perform well, that has to actually be good content, and social is the testing ground. So if you're posting stuff all the time and you're picking your most viral content and saying, okay, this is resonating, how do we now turn this into an ad? And how do we use this in a way that is more like one-to-one? Is this something that actually would be like hilarious on a billboard and get us attention? Should we look at our social data for the last year and make a Super Bowl ad out of this if you're a company with that level of budget? But you know what I'm saying? It's not just, it's where good content is exposed, because you get to post to an audience that it then crowdsources and tells you like, this is good. Obviously, some parts of that are to like live on the social platforms themselves, and that's why it performs well. But, using that content to actually fuel the rest of what you're doing is a really good strategy. Like I wouldn't run a paid social ad that looks like an ad and then have my organic social content be the stuff that's actually performs well. And
but that's what happens a lot, man. You know it.
A lot. Yeah. And even like in sports, like we see a lot of like your social content is actually your best content in terms of access, and it's funny, it's engaging, real time. But then
how many times have people said, why can't our ads be as good as our tweets? Or why can't our ads be as good as what we're doing from a real standpoint? And a lot of times they're organizationally separated out too. So
exactly. And then you go to their websites and their mobile apps, and they are, just posting full press conferences there and old school articles still. And it's like, okay, you could own those audiences too by having your best content in those platforms. Like, again, the social content could do more for you than it's currently doing. If you use it for your shop ads, if you use it for your owned and operated, if you like use it for your email marketing, like find a way to take the content that clearly is your best and translate it to other places. And that could be like the kind of the core of your strategy, instead of like marketing, social, in-game entertainment, all those things like separate and not really working together on the best content.
No, and I look, at the end of the day, it's really easy to carve out social, and we talk a lot about social and YouTube, but it's an integrated brand experience is what we're trying to always get at, right? Where, I even as I talk about this in my mind, I can be like, yeah, social should be this, but it really does need to be an integrated experience. But it's this idea of how do we find a way to create content that really resonates, that's actually creative, that connects with an audience that people want to see? How does that become the dominating content across all mix, versus, oh, we do that for fans on social, and then over here on ads we do something else. I think you're right. That's a great way of thinking about how do they connect. So let's go back to the NFL a little bit and kind of take me back into, I don't know, you had a few different stops in a few different places, but there's so much content that has to be created. There's a speed at which you've got to move. It's not like the world of many people where there's a brief that's written, that brief then gets approved, that then goes over to a team to have a kickoff meeting, and then that goes to a designer that starts to create it, and there's feedback. And again, there are many places that have to have systems and processes. I'm not talking down to like the need for that, but the NFL has had to exist, and a lot of franchises, almost with people that are jack of all trades, people that are hybrid creators, people that almost operate more like editors of a newspaper or a magazine article, rather than a strategist and a creator and a creative. So tell me a little bit about how content and concepts kind of got created and kind of came together in some of your NFL days that again might glean some insight into challenging maybe the way other teams operate and move today.
Yeah. I mean, I was always really lucky. Like when I worked at the 49ers, we had like a really savvy content team that was like always looking to get creative in the different ways we could make a piece of content. And the same team that was like writing content, was on air, was creating social, like we were all doing a little bit of everything in terms of creating, posting, but also running the website and like working across the analytics and marketing. So we would constantly be coming up with ideas, posting them, testing them, and like reassessing like what actually is performing well. And obviously the team doing well helps. Like you can't get around that. It helps.
You mean the team winning?
The team winning.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we were lucky enough in my first year there to have a good team on the field. So it all came together in terms of like taking advantage of that. And I think we took the most advantage of that we could possible. But there is like residual benefit to that. And there's also like a huge negative when the team isn't doing well and there's not so much you can do to kind of get around that. But yeah, I think it's really important that like there is a team of diverse content creators within a group who don't think in the same way and see things a little differently from every kind of level of fandom, right? Like there's certain people who are like super fans within, you know, a team like that, and they have a different perspective on the type of content that should be creating. And then there's people who come in as like very casual, and the goal is, especially with social content, is to kind of meet all of those needs. You're not only speaking to your super fans, you're trying to bring more in. So having a diverse team of creators, a big enough team to have multiple ideas, is super important. And I think that's part of why, you know, teams will succeed.
What skill sets are you looking for in those groups? Because, you know, you can really, well, it can just be challenging, right? Because, you know, there's creators, there's writers, there's designers, there's producers, there's people who are more like strategists, and you can get hyper specific. But what I hear you describing is almost like people that, what I kind of like to call these T-shaped employees, they are team members. They've got something they're really great at, but they also have broad skill sets across a lot of them. They're a little strategic. They're very creative. They can make some things. They've got kind of an entrepreneurial mindset. But tell me what you are describing when you're kind of talking about those kind of people and the makeup on the team.
Yeah. I mean, I think people who are able to be scrappy is like a really big part of content creation on social, right? You got to find ways to make good content with the resources that you have. I would much rather have somebody who, you know, knows how to make something by just being in the right place at the right time, being confident in what they're trying to get, and like editing it on their phone, than somebody who is just like an expert in like Premiere. And there's different roles for those different people, right? You need a professional video team, you need a professional design team, and then you need a social team. But I think, you know, and this is definitely the case in sports and not the case for brands. Every social media person in sports is also a content creator, right? So they need to come up with ideas and execute ideas, but also work with the creative teams on briefs and, you know, notes on things that are above their skill set in terms of video editing and design. And there's those layers, right? Where a lot of times at brands, they're relying on an agency and everything is back and forth, and they're not actually creators themselves, which more and more brands are moving towards. Social is a creative role because social content has a very specific style. And part of that is being a little bit reactive and nimble with your team. Yeah. So having people on the team who know how to create content in those ways, but also know how to work with creatives when needed is like really, really important. And that's like part of where our tool came from, is like, there's a need for Adobe Photoshop and Premiere for those people, but social teams need like their creative tool as well. And that's works with the design team, but also they are autonomous to create a video on their phone when they need to. And everybody kind of understands that, I think, at this point.
Yeah. I love the phrase, every person in sports is also every social person in sports is also a content creator. And while I think that, yes, you can apply that to sports, I think even when I was at Universal, it was something I was trying to solve. Yeah. It was, I feel like we leaned at times too much strategy. Yeah. And I was just like, look, we're never going to fulfill the vision of building audiences, engaging fans, if we've got a strategy team, we're writing briefs, we're talking a lot, we're thinking a lot, and then we got to bring in the people that do the making. And I don't think I figured it out perfectly. And I think that a lot of directors of social are trying to solve that. And some of them are like, we need strategy, and then we need briefs, and then we need a creative team. And that's cool if it works for you. I probably lean more into the fluidity of a very creative bunch. And so let's talk a little bit about the tool. So give us a little bit of the backstory of you transitioning from being in kind of sports social marketing and seeing an opportunity, seeing a need to be able to create content quickly, iteratively, and just tell us about Slate.
Yeah. I mean, I think the social platforms themselves really changed the way content gets created by building the creative tools into those platforms, and then seeing like a pretty big outcome in terms of people using those tools that's, were built for consumers, but also brands. And it really started with stories, right? Where, first on Snap, then on Instagram, you could record a video on your phone and then create right there, right? Add text overlays, like add a sticker, add a frame. And that became like a creative tool that everyone was using, where before you would create your content and then just schedule it on social. Now you're actually creating your content within Instagram and like their editing software. And part of that is like, it's really easy to do on a phone. The other part is like, it outputs a certain style that fits for social media, right? So, being in the content creation space, I went from the 49ers to go back to the NFL. I was on the international team with a heavy focus on social. I often found myself being autonomous and creating content in these platforms and thinking, man, it would really make sense if I had the editing capabilities of these native platforms, but the brand control of what I get when I actually put in a request of like the design team and the video editing team. It's easy enough to like type in a font over a video on, a platform like Instagram. Like, why can't that be our own fonts? And I actually was partly inspired in that from my co-founder, Michael, who was a video editor at the 49ers with me. And then our other co-founder, Will, they were doing their own startup at the time that was focused on, it was more of a B2C startup where it was focused on brand fonts. And, brands were telling them, they don't just want their fonts within this kind of more public tool. They wanted to have access to those on their phone to create content with. And I was always kind of talking to Michael about ideas. And like when we talked about that specifically, there was kind of a light bulb of like, wait, imagine like all the editing experience that we're getting natively. Can we build a tool that is a social first editor that is as easy as a consumer tool, but as like powerful as any enterprise brand? And our experience told us like, basically we would love to have that tool. And as soon as we talked about that, we're like, wow, we wish we had that when we were doing that job.
So let's go build it.
Yeah. And they had the infrastructure already with like the startup they were doing to say like, let's build a prototype. And then we kind of had a thing pretty quickly that we, and then we were very well connected within sports. So we started showing it to sports social media managers and realized very quickly, like, okay, we're on to something. There's a solution here. Let's take this to the next level. And yeah, that was 5 years ago now.
Wow. Yeah. So just to, and if you guys have anything that you want us to put up here to kind of show the tool, we're happy to kind of share it in the videos, but I've had a chance to jump into Slate. It's super cool. By the way, this is not an ad. I just really like the platform that Eric and his team have created. And yeah, it's, imagine a tool that you can go in and almost treat like Instagram stories, but you've got dozens or hundreds of overlays that have been designed by professional designers, but you can go out and use them in the field while you're covering. So really great for kind of live events, definitely great for sports. But I know you guys are adding tons of features as you go. I've seen some of the GIFs, some of the stuff that you can create original. You can add text kind of right there. Some of them edible, some of them not. But it's a really cool platform, especially for a handful of the really important use cases. And I'm excited to see kind of where you guys take it. And we tested it out here at Maverick, and I'm sure we'll be a customer at some point because we think, I guess the other thing I just say is I love the space that you're in because I believe it's growing. And what I mean by that, about the space, I mean is social media people, content people are looking for ways to create content faster, more efficiently, but still hot, still fire, still it's got to be crisp and polished. Yes. It's not, gone are the days that you're like, oh yeah, let's do some social content that looks super organic. And what that really means is blurry and crappy content. It's no, it's not that anymore. We've got 4K cameras in our pockets. We've got tools like Slate and other tools that you guys I know are kind of reviewing and kind of looking at. And I've just really enjoyed to see that kind of thing open up. And I think we're going to continue to see it with things like AI and technology that can start to even make us be more efficient with output and batching content and turning one piece of content into 20 pieces of content. Is that something that you're hearing a lot of from your partners in sports that you're needing kind of the help solve? Is it's not just the turnkey in the moment to tell a story from a live standpoint, but it's also how are we creating lots of content and batching content to keep up with the speed of what fans need and these platforms need?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that is what we're hearing and what we're building currently. We are a great tool currently for live events. What we will be very soon is a tool for inputting a bunch of different raw content and outputting a bunch of social first content based on your rules and requirements, right? So it's the idea that there's never enough to feed the beast, and it's just a matter of how much more efficiently can we create really engaging content. And that's kind of our goal, is to make it easier and easier for every piece of content you see on social to be generated. Yeah. Because these teams aren't getting staffed up, they're just not, even though the demand
produce more faster with less people.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
But also make it awesome.
Totally. And yeah, it's native one day and then it needs to be branded the next, and the algorithm favors this and now it favors that. It's a lot to manage, and there's always more needed. And the content is only getting more and more complex. It was easier to create one story tile at a time, right? Harder to edit together an engaging reel that now includes audio and stuff popping in and out and transitions and from full screen to split screen and all the things that, it's not it's getting, the content isn't getting more simple. And it's not the old platforms are dying, right? These teams still have to post to Facebook as well and keep that audience engaged. So the demands keep piling up, and that's what we're solving.
I love that. So let me take one step back. And by the way, go to, where is it? Slate.com.
Slate Teams.
There you go. SlateTeams.com. Check it out. And hit up Eric. He's kind of active on all the places, but I did want to go back to one quick question, because I always like to ask this, and you could totally shout out people that are using your tool in sports franchises out there, or you can go back to your days, kind of what you did when you were back in the NFL. But where did you look for inspiration, and if the brands maybe, and what are they doing today that you feel that people have to kind of have on kind of their front?
Yeah. I mean, being in sports, we obviously would always look around, right? Look around to other teams, look around to what the league is doing. I think the league level for teams is always some a group you look up to, because they're, frankly, they're more staffed than the teams are and have a lot more resource, and then are creating similar themes of content. So working for an NFL team, we would always look to the league social accounts, and what they're doing. And I've always thought the beauty space does a really good job in terms of creating content that is organic to social, but also reinforcing a brand image.
Is there a brand specifically that you'd point people towards?
I mean, it's kind of the most trendy ones, the Fenties of the world that are pushing the envelope in terms of how to work with influencers and how to get their brand across, right? Yeah. Kylie Cosmetics, these ones that are, you wouldn't think that I would necessarily follow. I'm not their demographic.
They're showing up in your feed, is what you're saying?
Yes. And as a social media creator, I think you need to have a feed or a burner feed that isn't about your interests. It's about your interests in content. And I think those brands can learn a lot from what sports teams are doing and vice versa, even though there's different demographics. And I think that there's a lot there, and I think, sometimes I hear from brands like, oh, well, sports has so much content, like we don't really compare to them.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean there's not a lot you can learn of like how to be a little bit more like a sports team on social, knowing that when you look at all industries, they like outperform every industry. And part of that is like they have amazing highlights and the product is very visual, but there's more going on than just that. And you could see it when you follow those feeds, like it is these teams are like next level in terms of their ability to create good social content. And it wasn't always that way. It used to be like a pretty big delta between like the worst team on digital and social and the best team. And in the last 5 years, definitely, over the last 10 years, that has become a lot closer. Like every team is doing it well, and they're doing it with very small staffs, which is what's really impressive.
Yeah. Dude, so good. So many nuggets in there, that I wanted to kind of agree on. I'm sure we're going to use a tool that does AI to chop this up into a bunch of really cool clips that we could use on social, which kind of goes with a little bit of the theme, of what we're talking about and what you guys are doing. So Eric, thanks for the time today. Super appreciate it. Go check out, slateteams.com. They're doing some really cool stuff. I'm excited to see what you kind of teased out today and kind of when that comes to fruition. But I really appreciate the time today.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, really appreciate having me on, and let's definitely stay in touch as we move forward.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that's it. Another episode of Radical Content in the Books. Thank you so much. Do all the things, like, subscribe, make sure it shows up in your feed, and we'll have some more content for you real soon. Thanks, everybody. See ya. Bye.